Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. The WGA writer's strike began way back on May 2nd, as I had talked about in a video that I had released at the time. And here we are 4.5 months later, and there's still no end in sight. So a lot of other people, including non-union workers who have been working on productions that are being struck, are also out of work unless they have found some other type of work to do in the meantime. And part of that also has to do with the fact that the actors have also been on strike for 2 months since July. Naturally, a lot of shows are now not in production, including a number of talk shows, such as the late-night talk shows that all stopped new production when the writer's strike began. And a number of daytime talk shows also stopped production, including the Drew Barrymore show, which apparently had some WGA writers on staff. So when Drew Barrymore announced last week that she was going to resume production of her show without the writers, she received considerable backlash in spite of assurances that it would operate in accordance with the rules of the WGA and actors' strikes. But a spokesperson for the Writers Guild said that Drew is a struck show and that union members were set to picket outside of Barrymore Studios Monday and Tuesday in New York City, which would have been this past Monday and Tuesday. The unnamed WGA spokesperson said in the statement, quote, "It has stayed off the air since the strike began on May 2nd, but has now unfortunately decided to return without its writers. The Guild has and will continue to picket any struck show that continues production for the duration of the strike," unquote. A CBS Media Venture spokesperson said, quote, "The Drew Barrymore show will not be performing any writing work covered by the WGA strike," unquote. Barrymore wrote an Instagram post last week and began by referring to her decision to walk away from hosting the MTV Film and TV Awards in May, which was in solidarity with the writers who had just gone on strike, saying, quote, "It had a direct conflict with what the strike was dealing with, which was studios, streamers, film, and television. It was also in the first week of the strike, and so I did what I thought was the appropriate thing at the time to stand in solidarity with the writers," unquote. But she pointed out that season 3 of her show had wrapped prior to the strike, so they never had to shut it down, and that she was making another conscious choice to return to work amid both the writers and actors strikes because the show was, quote, "bigger than just me," unquote. She said at the time, quote, "I own this choice. We are in compliance with not discussing or promoting film and television that is struck of any kind," unquote. Per WGA strike rules, most daytime talk shows are allowed to continue to run because a lot of them do not employ writers who are part of the union. 2 exceptions include the Drew Barrymore show and The Talk, which both went dark at the start of the strike and continue to play reruns, as are the late-night talk shows. Other daytime shows that are also airing originals include Tamron Hall and Live with Kelly and Mark. In a statement released Monday of last week, an actors union spokesperson said that Barrymore's show, quote, "is produced under the network television code, which is a separate contract and is not struck. It is permissible work and Drew's role as host does not violate the current strike rules," unquote. But now, Drew Barrymore isn't bringing back her daytime talk show, The Drew Barrymore Show, until the strike ends after all. The decision comes a week after the actor was criticized for saying The Drew Barrymore Show would premiere on September 18th in compliance with WGA guidelines but without writers. On her Instagram account, Barrymore wrote, quote, "I have listened to everyone and I am making the decision to pause the show's premiere until the strike is over. I have no words to express my deepest apologies to anyone I have hurt and, of course, to our incredible team who works on the show and has made it what it is today. We really tried to find our way forward, and I truly hope for a resolution for the entire industry very soon," unquote. A spokesperson for CBS Media Venture said in a statement, quote, We support Drew's decision to pause the show's return and understand how complex and difficult this process has been for her, unquote. So the Drew Barrymore show will air repeats for the foreseeable future, and the episodes that were taped last week when the show went back into production will not air. Consequently, the WGA has canceled planned pickets of the Drew Barrymore show, but striking guild members will be picketing The View, which is a WGA-covered struck show, on Monday. When Barrymore had announced that the show would be returning last week, the WGA condemned Barrymore's decision in a statement saying, quote, Drew Barrymore should not be on the air while her writers are on strike fighting for a fair deal. In reality, shows like this cannot operate without writing, and that is struck work, unquote. Following Barrymore's pause, CBS's The Talk and The Jennifer Hudson Show also announced they would no longer return on Monday as planned. Other daytime talk shows that have returned this season include The View, which has been airing episodes without its writers. And yet, the WGA has hardly criticized the hosts on The View, which includes Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Virginia Hamilton, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Sherry Shepard. 1 week ago, Barrymore ignited a firestorm when she announced her talk show would be returning amid the WGA and Actors Guild strikes. In the week since, tensions worsened and Barrymore, normally well-liked for her good-natured personality, intensified that criticism when she doubled down with a second now-deleted video message. If anything, her attempt to quell any criticism had the opposite effect. Barrymore was at the eye of the storm, but she was not the only daytime host originally intending to return this week. Before Monday, The Jennifer Hudson Show and CBS's The Talk, which is not syndicated, were going to launch new seasons on Monday, September 18th, as well as Sherry Shepard's Sherry and Karamo Brown's Karamo, though those two shows are not struck or covered by the WGA, like Tamron Hall and Live with Kelly and Mark, which have already been back on the air. And ABC's The View, which employs WGA writers, never ceased production during the strike, at a time when many others like The Talk and The Kelly Clarkson Show immediately halted last spring. Some of those shows have received some heat for returning, but Barrymore was the only host to attempt to get ahead of her return beforehand on social media, declaring that she'd be working during the strikes, immediately making her a target. And that was probably her biggest mistake, though I don't believe that she had any ill intent, but the WGA completely hounded her. Strangely, this wasn't part of Barrymore's attempt to explain her return. Syndicated TV shows have contractual obligations to deliver new episodes to their local station partners. Unlike network shows like The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel Live, which have permanent real estate on a network schedule, nationally syndicated daytime talk shows like The Drew Barrymore Show are required to produce a certain amount of episodes to more than 200 local stations throughout each television season. In other words, this was a business decision and not one that Barrymore made alone. Hosts like Barrymore are under contract with major media production companies to perform their hosting duties, and like any regular job, they eventually have to show up to work. Syndicated talk shows are typically required to deliver 35 to 40 weeks of new episodes to their station partners. If they don't, they can lose their show. And clearly, the WGA doesn't actually care about that, because the striking writers would lose their jobs too if the show gets canceled. It's as simple as that. A daytime talk show employee said, quote, "We have 200 clients that we have to deliver original episodes to. It's not a network show. With late night, you have one client, the network," unquote. Shows like Drew and Jennifer Hudson could have pushed back their premiere dates and reconstructed their yearly production schedules in hopes that the strikes would soon come to an end. But with no end seemingly in sight in the current WGA and AMPTP impasse, local stations and advertisers are expecting original content this fall from the shows for which they are paying a hefty license fee to carry. Frank Sicca, who is the executive vice president of programming for Fox television stations, the station group that carries many national syndicated talk shows, such as The Jennifer Hudson Show, said, quote, "In theory, you could push back your debut if you're concerned about the strike. There are already more repeats than anybody needs. So the idea of your main talk shows not coming back, that gets a little scary," unquote. He added, quote, "More repeats would just be a quicker death march for syndication. It's a critical time, and if there's not a way to do original programming, then you can see the end of national syndication," unquote. But for the writers, who also feel that they are on a death march, it's important to note that they're fighting for better wages and working conditions in a strike that has now surpassed 4 months. Barrymore's own writers have spoken out against production returning. And the WGA recently rejected an offer from the AMPTP that met most of their demands, with the exception of studios being forced to hire a lot more writers than they actually need. But for those working in daytime, their livelihood depends on these talk shows, each of which employs anywhere from 150 to 200 staffers, including 2 to 4 writers on the team. So I think it's very likely that Barrymore wanted, in part, to bring her show back for the sake of all of its staffers who are also suffering because of the strike. And staffers from other talk shows aren't happy either. An employee on a current talk show said, quote, "We have to come back or else hundreds of people are out of work. Stations will pull us right off the air. They'll put us in the middle of the night, and we'll stay in the middle of the night. That's just how it works," unquote. An employee from a different talk show echoed this sentiment. Quote, "If even one major station group pulls out and says they're not going to run our show, even if they have repeats, that affects ratings and advertising. It affects everything. Why would we risk letting a show die and letting people lose their jobs permanently if we can do a show without violating rules?" Unquote. The individual added, quote, "The strike doesn't look like it's anywhere close to being settled. The two sides can't even agree who owes who the next offer. Are we supposed to wait around forever?" Unquote. Unfortunately, there's no way to predict when the strikes may end, and there's simply no telling how many more people may be adversely affected by them. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.